Happy Halloween to all you goblins, ghosts, and ghouls out there. And if it's not Halloween when you're watching this, just pretend that it is. Halloween always makes me nostalgic for TV specials, campfire stories, and tales of horror. And, well, I kind of celebrate that all year round on this show. Halloween just makes it extra special. And if I'm looking for a dose of all three of these elements, I like to turn to a childhood favorite of mine. That would be Are You Afraid of the Dark? That's right, the Nickelodeon show that gave kids of the 90s nightmares for years. And today we're going to celebrate one of their all-time Halloween classics. So get some non-dairy creamer and throw it on the fire, because tonight we're talking about the tale of the Twisted Claw. I'm Ryan Reed, and this is Fright Films. Sorry, I couldn't do the lights off thing the entire episode. Now, in case you're unaware, Are You Afraid of the Dark was a Nickelodeon horror anthology TV series created by DJ McHale and Ned Candle. It was co-produced by both Nickelodeon and the Canadian company Cinar, and it ultimately ran for 5 seasons in the early to mid-90s, before being brought back for 2 additional seasons. After that, it's since been renewed as 2 miniseries, one in 2019 and one in 2021. The original series revolves around a group of kids known as the Midnight Society who would sit around a campfire and tell scary stories. Each week, we as the audience would be treated to a brand new tale of terror. Think of it as like a less violent version of Tales from the Crypt. And this episode was actually the first one that Are You Afraid of the Dark did that surrounded Halloween. In fact, this episode was originally the pilot that was aired as a special before the regular series started. Later on, it was added as episode 4 of the first season. The exact air date seems up in the air, but most sources have it listed as October 31st, 1990 in Canada, or October 25th, 1991 in the US. Either way, the tale of the Twisted Claw became an Are You Afraid of the Dark classic. The episode begins in a strange way that I don't think they ever repeated. It starts with Eric in the middle of telling a story that doesn't have an ending, which is an odd choice. In fact, the Midnight Society actually chastises him for calling a meeting without a proper ending to his story. And it's like, come on, Eric, get your stuff together. No wonder you're gone by season 2.
You shouldn't call a meeting without a full story, Eric.
It's better than no story at all.
Anyway, after this, David begins the real story. It opens on Mischief Night, the night before Halloween, and 2 kids, Dougie and Kevin, who, by the way, is rocking the most 90s hat I think I've ever seen, decide to go to the house of Miss Clove, who the kids refer to as a witch, to play a prank on her. They spray shaving cream in her face, causing her to knock over a vase in her house. After this, the kids run away, and Mrs. Clove stands on her porch, laughing eerily. I gotta say, for a 90s kids TV show, her evil laugh is pretty darn good. It's both equal parts kinda creepy and kind of over the top, which works for the tone of the show. Also, Miss Clove is played by Anne Page, who happens to be the wife of Aaron Taggart. Now, fans of Are You Afraid of the Dark are going to recognize that name because he was the actor who portrayed Dr. Vink multiple times throughout the series. Just a fun little side note. The next night, Halloween, Kevin and Dougie decide to go trick-or-treating. Also, I gotta mention, the mask that Dougie is wearing has forever been burned into my brain. I don't know why. It's so bizarre. Like, where in the world did they find this thing? It's like part goblin, part old man. What is it? They decide to trick-or-treat at Miss Clove's, thinking she won't remember them. But since kids never stop by her house on Halloween, Miss Clove gives them something extra special. A wooden recreation of a vulture's claw. I never understood why it had to be wooden, why they made such a big deal that it was a wooden claw. Like, is it a Nickelodeon standards and practices thing? Like, somebody was like, you can't make it a real vulture's claw. And it's like, but why? This thing's already gonna make these kids' lives awful. So isn't it creepier if it's real? Like, would they make a big deal about it being wood? I'm already off on so many tangents on this episode. Dougie is so weirded out by this that he wishes they could just go home. And then the claw moves. Following this, they get attacked by a group of thugs who are like 20-something years too early for the Purge films. Kevin and Dougie get away, but the next day, Kevin wishes that he could beat another kid in the 600, which I'm guessing is like a track thing based on them running around a field in the episode. I don't know, I hated PE. When Kevin makes his wish, the claw glows, which they say it moves, so that's another weird difference in this episode. But anyway, as they're running this 600 thing, with a sweet guitar riff going on, mind you, suddenly a ferocious dog appears from behind a tree, and it heads right for Kevin's nemesis. And then this happens. He just trips. That's it. The dog doesn't attack him or anything. It just runs in front of him. And then he tumbles. Apparently it's enough to break his leg. Okay, I buy it. After a short scene with the Midnight Society, who take the time to over-explain everything, we learn that Kevin is hanging out with Dougie at his house while Dougie's parents are out for dinner. They get in a fight, Kevin is a jerk again, and he wishes that Dougie would lose his parents. And then the phone rings. On the other line is a police officer telling Dougie that his parents have been in a car wreck and they're currently in the hospital. But before he can learn any more, Dougie hangs up the phone. Well, panicking, Dougie wishes that his Gramps was there, which, by the way, if these kids would just stop shoehorning the phrase, I wish, into every sentence, they could avoid a lot of this. But you know what? It's okay, because it leads to the greatest scene in the episode. Outside, a ghostly old car pulls up in front of the house. As Kevin and Dougie fight over the claw, we watch as a ghastly POV slowly approaches the front door. We have no idea what to expect. What will Gramps look like? What state of decay will he be in? What horror awaits on the other side of that front door? And as the tension builds, the doorbell finally rings. Dougie gets the claw, apologizes for breaking the vase, and wishes it had never happened. The claw disappears from his hand. The doorbell rings again, and when Dougie finally opens it, he sees his parents, safe on the other side. Everything seems to be back to normal. Once again, the doorbell rings, and as Kevin and Dougie open it, they find Miss Clove's vase, intact, sitting on their front porch. Attached is a note that reads trick or treat. David closes the story by saying,
All they could hear was the sound of the wind blowing through the trees. Or was it the cackle of a sly witch?
I may have been poking a little fun here or there, but The Tale of the Twisted Claw is actually a pretty effective episode, and its Halloween theming and ambiguous POV grandfather shots have stuck with me for years. The episode was directed by co-creator DJ McHale, and it was written by Chloe Brown, who was also DJ McHale, just using a pen name for some reason. Now, obviously, the episode was inspired by the old legend of the monkey's paw, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. After all, adapting folklore and old tales would become common practice for Are You Afraid of the Dark? And since it was the pilot, it does have a few rough edges, but it sets the tone for what the show would become, allowing it to grow into one of the most beloved and slightly twisted horror gateway shows ever created. I'm Ryan Reed. Have a happy Halloween.